What if I told you that science can predict whether you will ultimately get a divorce with up to 94% accuracy,
Yeah.
and that they can do this just by watching you and your partner have a conversation for like 3 minutes?
It is honestly wild to think about. Just 3 minutes.
Right. No crystal ball, no reading tea leaves, just 3 minutes of observation, and the data can practically map out the rest of your life. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Friday, April 10th, 2026, and we are looking at love, but not as some, mystical meteorological event. We're looking at it as a hard science.
Yeah, it's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the stack of sources we are synthesizing for you today is grounded in, well, decades of longitudinal studies. We're talking about massive data sets from multiple relationship psychology
Oh,
experts.
absolutely massive.
Exactly.
Huh.
But the real cornerstone of our material today is the groundbreaking work out of Dr. John Gottman's famous Love Lab at the University of Washington.
And I really want to set the scene for this love lab because this isn't just people filling out a questionnaire on a clipboard in some sterile office.
No, not at all.
The researchers literally built an apartment. Like, couples would come in, spend the weekend there, and just go about their normal lives, reading, cooking, watching TV. But the apartment was rigged.
Rigged in the name of science, of course.
Right, yeah. They had cameras on the walls, microphones everywhere, and the couples were hooked up to these biometric sensors tracking their heart rate, their blood velocity, even their sweat output. They were literally measuring the invisible physiological data of a relationship.
Which is just incredible. And what's fascinating here is how they use that data.
Yeah, and that brings us to our mission for you today. We are going to use that exact data to completely dismantle the Hollywood myth. You know the one. The music swells, their eyes meet, the lightning bolt of passion strikes, and, well, that magical spark just magically carries them through the next 50 years?
Which is a lovely story, but it's just not reality.
Exactly. We're tearing that down today. And in its place, we're handing you the actual data-backed algorithms and the daily habits that define a successful long-term marriage. Basically, we are learning the cheat codes today.
I love that. And, the first casualty of that Hollywood myth is the idea that a relationship is just this passive state you fall into.
Oh, like falling in love.
Right. When researchers analyze the biometric and observational data from these couples over 20, 30, or even 40 years, they find that a thriving marriage actually has very little to do with finding the one.
Wait, really? So the whole soulmate concept is out?
Yeah, pretty much. Instead, it is a highly proactive, constantly evolving project. So if passion isn't the bedrock, what is? Well, the data points to something surprisingly grounded: profound friendship. Friendship is the actual fundamental operating system of a lasting relationship.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources don't just mean, like, oh, we like hanging out and grabbing a beer. They introduce this specific structural concept called a love map, which, as I read it, it kind of felt like a cognitive blueprint of your partner's mind.
Precisely. A love map is literally the amount of cognitive room you allocate to your partner's inner world. It is a highly detailed, constantly updated database.
Like knowing their favorite color.
Well, deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's knowing who their current enemies are at the office, what their shifting hopes are for the next 5 years, their deepest current anxieties, and, their favorite ways to decompress right now. Not 10 years ago, but today.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of couples have a great love map from the year they started dating. They know their partner's favorite band from when they're 25. But 10 years later, they just haven't updated the database. They're living with a ghost of who their partner used to be.
That makes me think of this in terms of technology. Basically, a love map is a smartphone operating system update.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Because if you try to run a massive, complex 2026 application on software from 5 years ago, what happens? The phone freezes, the battery drains, the app crashes.
It's totally unusable.
Exactly. In a relationship, you are trying to run the massive complexities of your current life, like a new mortgage, a career change, raising kids, through a 5-year-old understanding of your partner. When you misinterpret the data they are sending you today, the system crashes. And that crash is a massive blowout argument.
That is a perfect analogy.
Huh.
Because an updated love map actually acts as a biological and emotional buffer against external stressors.
How so?
Let's say your partner walks in the door and they're completely silent, practically scowling. If your love map is outdated, you internalize that.
Yeah.
Your brain says, oh, they're mad at me, they're rejecting me, and your fight or flight system immediately kicks in.
Which I think we've all experienced.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But if your love map is updated and you know they just had a brutal quarterly review with a micromanaging boss, you don't internalize it. You interpret the data correctly. You say, they are stressed and it has nothing to do with me.
Oh, wow. So that completely prevents a fight before it even starts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that requires curiosity to be a continuous, daily practice. You have to actively keep updating the software.
So if friendship and these love maps are the operating system, how do couples actually code that software on a daily basis? Because this brings us to what the researchers call the behavioral mathematics of connection. And it revolves around these tiny, incredibly mundane it's called bids for connection.
Right. A bid for connection is the fundamental unit of emotional currency in a relationship. It's any attempt, verbal or nonverbal, to engage.
Give me an example of a nonverbal one.
Well, it can be as subtle as your partner letting out a heavy sigh while looking at their phone.
Just a sigh. Just a sigh. It's them bidding for your attention. Or it's them saying, wow, look at that weird bird outside. Or a light touch on the shoulder when they walk past you in the kitchen. They are bidding for your validation or just a moment of shared reality.
And the longitudinal data on how couples respond to these bids is just staggering. They tracked couples for 6 years, and the couples who stayed happily married turned toward these bids, meaning they acknowledged them, engaged, put the phone down about 86% of the time.
Yeah, that number is huge.
But the couples who eventually divorced, they only turned toward those bids about 33% of the time.
It is a seismic predictor of relationship lifespan because if we connect this to the bigger picture, what is actually happening underneath the surface when you turn toward a bid?
Right. It's more than just talking about a bird. Exactly. You aren't just being polite about a bird out the window. On a physiological level, you are signaling to your partner's nervous system that they are safe, that they are seen, and that they are valued. When you do that consistently, 86% of the time, you build what psychologists call a secure attachment. You are literally wiring each other's nervous systems for calm.
I have to say, here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, reading that 86% statistic made me sweat a little bit.
I think it makes everyone sweat.
Yeah, because on behalf of everyone listening, I have to ask, wait, does this mean we are expected to be on 100% of the time? Isn't responding to every single heavy sigh or random comment when I've had a terrible day completely exhausting? It sounds like a recipe for burnout.
And researchers anticipated that exact concern, which is why they discovered what they call the magic ratio. The 86% figure doesn't demand perfection.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. When observing the couples in the Love Lab, social psychologists found that stable, happy marriages maintain a highly specific ratio of positive interactions to negative interactions during conflict.
Yeah.
It is 5 to 1.
5 positive interactions to offset 1 negative interaction.
Exactly. And the reason for this comes down to the negativity bias wired into the human brain. Evolutionarily, we're designed to hyper-focus on negative threats.
To keep us alive, right?
Yeah. So one negative interaction like a snapped comment, an eye roll, or a harsh criticism floods the body with stress hormones. To biologically neutralize that one negative event, it takes 5 genuine positive moments. Warmth, humor, a shared joke, validation. This ratio is actually profoundly liberating for couples.
Because it proves you don't have to be perfect. The goal isn't to build a completely conflict-free life where nobody ever snaps. The goal is to build up a massive bank account of positive interactions. You are creating a thick padding of warmth.
A very thick padding, yes.
That way, when you inevitably miss a bid or you snap at your partner because you are exhausted, it doesn't just tank the entire relationship. The negative moment lands on a massive cushion of positive history.
Precisely. You have enough emotional capital to survive the hit.
Which is the perfect bridge to the giant elephant in the room. Because if this 5 to 1 ratio explicitly allows for negative interactions, we have to talk about fighting. Fights are going to happen.
Oh, without a doubt.
But a statistic in these sources completely derailed my understanding of what a fight even is. The 69% rule.
Ah, yes. The 69% rule is often the hardest pill for couples to swallow. Decades of data show that 69% of marital conflicts are perpetual.
Meaning they don't go away.
Right. They are rooted in fundamental differences in personality, temperament, or lifestyle.
Yeah.
And they will never, ever be solved.
Wait, never.
Never. You will literally be arguing about these exact same issues on your 50th wedding anniversary.
That sounds so depressing.
It sounds like it, but it's just human nature. One of you is highly punctual, and the other operates on flexible time. One is a spender who loves luxury. The other is a saver who loves security. One of you recharges by throwing a dinner party for 10 people, and the other just needs to sit in a dark room with a book.
Yeah, I know couples exactly like that.
Right. These are not puzzles to be solved. They are fundamental realities of who you both are.
The analogy that came to mind when I was reviewing this is having a trick knee. You know, like an old sports injury from college. You don't wake up every single morning, take out a hammer, and try to permanently cure the trick knee.
No, that would be terrible.
Yeah, you know it's going to ache when it rains. So what do? You learn to walk with it, you check the weather, you wear a knee brace on a hike, you manage your environment so the knee doesn't ruin your entire day. And the sources emphasize a massive paradigm shift here. Successful couples stop trying to engage in problem solving for these issues, and they shift entirely to conflict management.
But this raises an important question. If you are going to live with these unsolvable issues forever, how do you disagree without destroying the respect in the relationship? How do you fight about the same thing for 40 years without eventually hating each other?
And this brings us to the most famous concept from the Love Lab, the Four Horsemen.
Yes, the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. These are the four destructive communication patterns that allow researchers to predict that 94% divorce rate we talked about. The first horseman is criticism.
And that's different from just complaining, right?
Exactly. A complaint is about a specific behavior, like, I was upset when you didn't empty the dishwasher. But criticism is an attack on your partner's core character. It's saying, you didn't empty the dishwasher because you were inherently selfish and lazy.
Ouch. Yeah, that stings.
It does. And the antidote to criticism is using a soft startup. You focus on I statements and express a positive need.
Okay, got it. And the second horseman is defensiveness. This is playing the victim, making excuses, or counterattacking when your partner complains.
Which is such a natural reflex.
Totally. But the antidote the data points to is incredibly specific. It's taking responsibility for just 5% of the problem. You don't have to agree with everything they're saying, but if you can validate just a tiny sliver of their reality, like, you know what, I was distracted when you asked me to do that, it completely deflates the tension.
It really does. Now, the third horseman takes us back to the biometric sensors in the love lab. Stonewalling.
The silent treatment.
Essentially, yes. This is when the listener completely withdraws from the interaction. They turn away, cross their arms, and just shut down. But the biometric data reveals exactly why this happens. They aren't just being stubborn or ignoring you. They are physiologically flooded.
Meaning their heart rate spikes.
Yes, their heart rate breaches 100 beats per minute. The body is dumping adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream, triggering a complete amygdala hijack.
Which means the prefrontal cortex, you know, the part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, and processing language, literally goes offline. They are biologically incapable of having a rational conversation at that moment.
Exactly. So the antidote to stonewalling is not to follow them into the next room and force them to keep talking. That is the worst thing you can do. The antidote is physiological self-soothing. You have to call a structured timeout.
And the data shows it takes a minimum of 20 minutes for the human nervous system to flush those stress hormones and return to a baseline where rational thought is possible again.
20 minutes at least.
Okay, so we have criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. But the fourth horseman is the absolute most dangerous, the ultimate relationship killer, contempt.
Yes. Contempt is the single strongest predictor of divorce. Period. It is expressing superiority over your partner through mockery, sarcasm, name-calling, sneering, or even just eye-rolling.
Just rolling your eyes can do that much damage.
Yes, because contempt is uniquely toxic. Its core message is disgust.
And the sources had a detail about contempt that, frankly, blew my mind. When Gottman's team tracked couples who exhibited high levels of contempt, it wasn't just killing the relationship, it was literally destroying the physical health of the person receiving it.
The physical health. Let that sink in.
The researchers could predict how many infectious diseases, like colds and flus, the receiving partner would get that year. Contempt destroys the immune system.
It does. Because being the target of chronic disgust keeps the body in a permanent state of high alert stress, which severely suppresses immune function. You simply cannot build a secure attachment with someone who fundamentally disgusts you or someone who views you with disgust.
But wait, if contempt is that deeply ingrained, like if you're at the point where you are physically rolling your eyes and mocking the person you married, is there even a way back from that? Because from the outside, it feels like once you cross the line into disgust, the structural integrity of the relationship is just gone.
It is incredibly difficult, yes. But the data shows there is a way back. The antidote to contempt is actively building a culture of appreciation and respect.
How do you do that when you're so angry?
It requires retraining your brain's reticular activating system. Right now, a contemptuous brain is actively scanning the environment for mistakes. It's looking for things the partner is doing wrong to validate that feeling of disgust. You have to consciously force yourself to scan the environment for things they're doing right.
So flipping the script.
Exactly.
Oh.
You have to express gratitude for small, everyday things out loud. And over time, that conscious appreciation neutralizes the contempt.
So what does this all mean? Let's step back and look at the macro picture here. If 69% of a couple's problems are unsolvable and we have to constantly manage these differences using soft startups and physiological timeouts to avoid the four horsemen, how do people actually stay happy?
It sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it?
Yeah. Does this completely debunk the old idea that opposites attract? Because if we have to align and work this hard, it sounds like we just need to marry a clone of ourselves.
Well, that is the core tension of long-term commitment. But
Mm.
the answer is no. You do not need to marry a clone. Opposites can and do attract, and they absolutely can thrive. But you need what the research calls aligned North Stars.
Meaning shared values.
Exactly. There is a vital difference between shared hobbies and shared values. You could be complete opposites in temperament. You can be the extroverted hiker, and they can be the introverted reader. That's totally fine. But you must align on the foundational architecture, your core integrity, your work ethic, how you handle finances, your parenting philosophies, and your overarching lifestyle expectations. If the North Stars don't align, the friction becomes fatal.
So the architecture of the we isn't about having the exact same personality. It's about building on the same structural blueprint. And the synthesized data gives us some fascinating, highly specific practical data points on what this architecture actually looks like in the real world.
Oh, the practical data is the best part.
Right. For example, maintaining the connection through date nights. The data shows that couples who manage 2 or more date nights a month see a massive correlation with happiness, roughly 56 to 114% higher relationship satisfaction.
And look at the data on shared meaning. Shared religious attendance, for instance, correlates with 112 to 212% higher odds of marital satisfaction.
Wow, over 200%.
Yeah. And the sociologists note this isn't necessarily about the specific theology of the religion. It is about the shared, predictable ritual of connection. It's a dedicated time where both partners are reflecting on higher values, community, and purpose together.
Here is another wildly practical data point. An equal division of household labor. Dividing up the chores fairly is cited repeatedly as one of the top predictors of marital success.
Which makes perfect sense.
It does, because an imbalance there creates a slow, invisible drip of resentment that eventually becomes the horseman of contempt.
Exactly. The cognitive load of managing a household simply has to be shared. And when we look at the physical architecture of the relationship, the data on intimacy provides a fascinating reality check. Obviously, emotional intimacy is paramount. But when researchers looked at the satisfaction benefits of physical sexual intimacy, they found that the benefits actually plateau at about once per week.
Really? Just once a week?
Yeah, having sex more frequently than that doesn't necessarily yield higher overall relationship stability.
But the sources were incredibly clear that non-sexual physical touch is a completely different story.
Oh, crucial. Absolutely crucial. Hugging, holding hands, sitting close on the couch.
Yeah.
Non-sexual touch is vital because it triggers the release of oxytocin and drastically reduces cortisol, which is the stress hormone. It is a constant, low-level biometric signal to the nervous system that says we are safe and we are connected.
There is one more major structural piece the sources emphasize, and it touches on a very modern problem: interdependence versus codependence.
This is a vital historical context. 100 years ago, human beings lived in extended multi-generational communities. We had an entire village to provide us with emotional support, economic stability, and social connection.
But today, we're so isolated.
Today, we have largely isolated ourselves, yes. And we have placed the burden of that entire village onto one single person, our spouse.
We expect them to be our best friend, our financial advisor, our co-parent, our therapist, and our passionate lover, all at the exact same time.
And it is a crushing amount of weight for one human being to bear. Overdependence strains a marriage to the breaking point. The data shows that the happiest relationships consist of two whole, distinct individuals. They maintain interdependence, meaning they rely on each other, but they avoid codependence.
So they have lives outside of the marriage.
Exactly. They maintain deep outside friendships. They pursue personal goals. They draw energy from a broader support network, and then they bring that fresh energy back into the marriage rather than suffocating it by demanding their partner be everything.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. What we've learned is that a happy marriage isn't something you magically find out in the wild when the lightning bolt strikes. It is something you continually build.
A daily practice.
Right. It is built through the mundane daily acts of kindness, like putting your phone down and turning toward a heavy sigh. It is built through recognizing when your partner's heart rate is over 100 beats per minute and just giving them 20 minutes to calm down. It's built on making sure you hit that 5-to-1 magic ratio of positive to negative interactions to buffer against the hard days.
And it requires the profound resilience to navigate inevitable seasons of boredom or disconnection. It requires accepting that 69% of your fundamental differences are just going to be there forever, and consciously choosing to manage those differences with a soft startup instead of contempt.
To everyone listening right now, you deserve a massive congratulations for taking the time to upgrade your relationship knowledge today. Because the absolute best news from all of this clinical data is that every single one of these evidence-based skills is completely learnable.
Absolutely learnable.
You are not doomed by a lack of initial chemistry, and you aren't doomed by the arguments you had yesterday. You can literally start practicing a soft startup or scanning your environment to build a culture of appreciation today. You can start rewiring the system right now.
The clinical trials confirm it. Even couples who are currently entrenched in the Four Horsemen can turn the ship around and improve significantly by intentionally adopting these new patterns.
I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder as you go about your day. We spent this entire deep dive talking about marriage, romance, and life partners. But if these core principles, turning toward bids for connection, maintaining a 5-to-1 positivity ratio to bypass the brain's negativity bias, and avoiding the immune-destroying toxicity of contempt, if these are the scientific bedrock of a thriving marriage, couldn't they also be the ultimate cheat code for transforming our relationships with our coworkers, or our estranged family members, or even our deepest political rivals? Think about it.
It is a profound application of the data. Because at the end of the day, the human nervous system responds to respect, validation, and safety, completely regardless of the context.
So the next time you are watching a movie and the music swells and the lightning bolt strikes between the two romantic leads, you can just smile. Because you know the real magic doesn't happen in the storm. It happens in the garden you actively choose to tend every single day.